It is the dead of winter, somewhere on the northern frontier of the Roman Empire. Snow blankets the ground, the wind howls down from the mountains. The temperature is far below freezing, cold enough to kill an unprotected man in a single night. And out here, in this frozen wilderness, far from the warm cities of Italy, sits a Roman army, thousands of soldiers, living through the winter in a camp of leather tents. How did they do it? How did men sleep through brutal northern winters in tents in conditions that would kill a modern camper and emerge in the spring ready to fight? The answer is one of the great untold stories of Roman military genius, because the Romans did not simply endure the winter, they engineered their way through it with a combination of discipline, technology, and planning so effective that their armies could campaign and survive in climates that should have destroyed them. Today, we are going to step inside the Roman winter camp and discover exactly how the legions stayed alive and even comfortable in the heart of the killing cold. Using advanced AI trained on the archaeology of Roman military camps and forts, the surviving Roman military manuals, the writings of Roman commanders including Caesar himself, and the discoveries of preserved Roman military equipment and clothing, we have reconstructed how the Roman army survived the winter. The first thing to understand is that the Romans, above all peoples of the ancient world, did not improvise. They planned, and that planning began long before the first snow fell. The most important fact about a Roman army is that it built. Every Roman soldier was, in addition to being a fighter, a skilled laborer and engineer, and the Roman army carried with it the tools and the expertise to build almost anything it needed. When a Roman army stopped for the night, even for a single night in friendly territory, it did not simply sprawl on the ground. It built a fortified camp, a marching camp, with a ditch, an earthen rampart, and a palisade, laid out in a precise, standardized grid that was the same in every camp across the entire empire. Every soldier knew exactly where everything would be: the gates, the main roads, the commander's tent, the unit's tent lines, because the layout never changed. This standardization meant a camp could be built with astonishing speed and order. But for the winter, the Romans built something far more substantial: the winter camp, where the army would settle in to wait out the cold months when campaigning was impossible. The winter camp was a different beast entirely from a one-night marching camp. When a Roman army knew it would spend the winter in one place, it invested enormous effort in building a proper, semi-permanent fortified base. The defenses were stronger: deeper ditches, higher ramparts, sometimes stone walls and towers if the army was wintering in a fixed fort. And crucially, the shelters were upgraded. While on the march, the soldiers used leather tents. In a long-term winter camp, they often built or improved more permanent barracks, timber buildings, huts, or substantially reinforced tent structures, depending on the time, the place, and the materials available. The army's engineers would source timber from the surrounding forests, cut and shape it, and construct rows of barrack blocks along the camp's standard grid. So the image of legionaries shivering all winter in flimsy little tents is, in many cases, not accurate. When the Romans planned to stay, they built themselves real, defensible, insulated winter quarters. The leather tent was for the march. The winter was for building. But even the tents themselves were far better than you might imagine. The Roman military tent was a sophisticated piece of equipment made from many pieces of leather, usually goatskin or calfskin, carefully stitched together into a strong, weatherproof shelter. Leather, unlike woven cloth, is excellent at blocking wind and shedding rain and snow, and a well-made leather tent created a genuinely sheltered space inside. A standard tent housed a small group of soldiers, a contubernium, typically 8 men who lived, cooked, and slept together as the basic social unit of the army, sharing the tent, sharing a mule to carry it, and sharing a cooking pot. 8 men packed together inside a closed leather tent generated a surprising amount of body heat, and that shared warmth, trapped inside the leather, was itself a powerful defense against the cold. The men slept close together on the ground, which was insulated from the cold and damp with straw, brushwood, leather, and their own equipment, raising them off the frozen earth and trapping a layer of warmth beneath them. The tent group was not just a military unit, it was a survival unit, 8 bodies sharing their warmth through the long winter nights. The soldier's clothing was another crucial layer of defense. We tend to picture the Roman soldier in his famous armor and his bare-legged tunic, dressed for the warm Mediterranean, but the Romans adapted sensibly and thoroughly to the cold climates of the north. Soldiers stationed in cold regions wore warm woolen tunics, sometimes several layers of them, and over these heavy woolen cloaks that shed rain and held in heat. They wore trousers, adopted from the northern peoples they fought and conquered, covering the legs against the cold, despite the fact that the Romans had once mocked trousers as barbarian dress. Practicality won out over fashion. They wrapped their lower legs in woolen leggings or puttees. And on their feet they wore sturdy, hobnailed boots, and in cold weather they stuffed them with wool, fur, or other insulation and wore socks. Those very socks that, as we know from the writing tablets found at the northern forts, families back home sent to their sons serving on the frigid frontier. The Roman soldier on a winter frontier was a far warmer figure than the bare-legged legionary of the popular imagination, bundled in wool and leather and fur against the killing cold. And then there was fire and the all-important matter of food and heat. A winter camp needed enormous quantities of firewood, and gathering and stockpiling fuel was a major part of the army's winter routine. Fires were used for cooking, for warmth, and for morale, and the more permanent winter quarters could include hearths and ovens. The famous Roman underfloor heating system, the hypocaust, which circulated hot air beneath the floors from a furnace, was used in the more permanent stone forts of the frontier, so that in the Great Wall forts, soldiers and especially their officers could enjoy genuinely heated buildings, including heated bathhouses, even in the depths of a northern winter. The idea of a Roman soldier on the frozen frontier soaking in a hot bath while snow fell outside is not fantasy. It is exactly what the archaeology of the frontier forts reveals. Hot food was essential for surviving the cold, and the army's logistics ensured a steady supply. The Roman soldier's diet was built around grain, which was made into bread, porridge, and a kind of hardtack, supplemented with meat, cheese, vegetables, salt, olive oil, and a sour wine, and warm meals cooked over the tent group's fire put vital heat and energy into cold bodies. Above all, what kept the Roman army alive through the winter was logistics and planning. The Romans understood, better than almost any army before the modern age, that wars are won not just by fighting, but by supply. Before winter set in, an army would stockpile vast quantities of grain and other supplies in its winter quarters, filling granaries built specifically to keep the grain dry and safe, raised off the ground on little pillars to allow air to circulate and to keep out damp and vermin. These granaries, whose distinctive remains are found at Roman forts across the empire, held enough food to feed the entire garrison through the months when no new supplies could easily be brought in. The army's quartermasters calculated rations, organized supply trains, secured fuel, and ensured that the camp had what it needed to survive until spring. And the famous Roman discipline did the rest. The strict routines of the camp, the duties, the guard rotations, the maintenance, the training, kept the soldiers occupied, organized, and physically active through the long, dark, cold months, when idleness and despair could be as deadly as the weather itself. A Roman winter camp was a machine for survival, and discipline was its engine. It is worth remembering, too, that the Romans generally tried to avoid fighting in winter altogether. For most of Roman history, warfare was a seasonal activity. Armies campaigned in the warmer months and withdrew into winter quarters when the cold set in. The roads became impassable, and supplies could not be moved. The whole point of the winter camp was to keep the army safe, fed, and intact through the dead season, so that it could take the field again, fresh and ready, when spring returned. This is exactly why a winter surprise attack, like the one a Viking warlord would launch against an Anglo-Saxon king centuries later, or like certain bold Roman commanders themselves occasionally attempted, was so devastating, it broke the unwritten rule, catching the enemy settled into winter quarters and unprepared to fight. But within their winter camps, sheltered, supplied, disciplined, and warm, the legions waited out the cold, and the Roman army's ability to keep itself alive and ready through the brutal northern winters was one of the quiet but crucial foundations of Rome's conquest of the world. That was how the Roman soldier survived the winter, not by miraculous toughness or by suffering nobly in flimsy tents, but by the same genius that conquered the world: engineering, discipline, and planning. They built fortified winter camps and reinforced barracks. They sheltered 8 men to a warm leather tent, sharing body heat through the night, raised off the frozen ground on insulating straw. They bundled themselves in wool and leather and fur and stuffed their boots against the cold. They burned great stockpiles of firewood, heated their forts with underfloor heating, soaked in hot baths while the snow fell, and ate warm meals cooked over their fires. And above all, they planned ahead, filling their granaries and organizing their supplies so that they could survive the dead season and emerge in spring ready to march and to fight. The legions did not beat the winter by being tougher than other men. They beat it the way Rome beat everything, by being better organized. And that, more than any sword or shield, is the real reason the eagles of Rome could fly even in the depths of the killing cold.